send it to AIMA. Yeah. Sure.
But they're sending it to you.
Okay, all right. All right, this next session is the panel before lunch. We have great Indian food coming, great Indian food buffet. So don't eat too much right now and or drink too much tea. This panel is about envisioning India's digital economy. The chairing the session is Vikram Chandra, founder of Editorji Technologies. He used to be with a great company that I admire called NVIDIA, and very unbiased and non-lobbying media company in India. We also have my good friend Vivek Wadhwa, whom I really respect, and I read all his material when he puts it out. He has some great books out, a lot of wisdom there. And Akhil Bansal, Deputy CEO of KPMG India, is here with us, and myself included on the panel. So with any further ado, I will turn this over to Vikram Chandra.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Solomon, for that. Just want to make sure the mic's here. Is the mic working? Can everyone at the back hear me? Yeah. All right, great. It's fantastic to have such a superb panel on what is arguably one of the biggest of many, many mega trends that we are seeing, especially around India. So we've been hearing a lot about Indian growth and how India is going to be perhaps the big opportunity over the next 8 to 10 years. That's layered with many other opportunities. And one of the biggest ones, of course, is the digital one. We've recently seen the launch of many telecom services that is bringing really cheap, ubiquitous digital services to the masses. An explosion in mobile phones, an explosion in digital services, some of the cheapest data rates now anywhere in the world. And that's one of the biggest opportunities that perhaps we're going to have. And I think individually, many of us here have also been embracing that. As Solomon was saying, I used to be, well, till a year and a half ago, running a big TV news company and being an anchor person, quit that to really try and take advantage of the opportunities that we are seeing in digital, and in my case, in digital videos, where everyone else is doing similar things. So absolutely fantastic panel. Mr. Mohandas Pai was talking to us earlier about the opportunities in India. I'm going to get you to just layer what you were saying earlier in the morning, with specifically the extent to which all the growth that you were talking about, that you believe is coming to India, the opportunities that we are seeing of transformation, what extent are those contingent upon digital transformation?
Well, let me say this. India missed the industrial revolution. We didn't have the shipping, we didn't build the roads, we had the railways, we didn't have the power plants, we didn't build manufacturing because we were colonized and it had its own impact. And we didn't have capital. It's a different world. But in the digital revolution, India is ahead of the United States. Let me tell you why. Out of 1.3 billion people, 900 million have a phone, a feature phone or a smartphone. 450 million have a smartphone. India is going to buy 150 million smartphones a year. We have the cheapest data plan in the world. 95% of India is covered by 4G. And the data plan gives you unlimited data for $1.5 a month, 100 rupees a month, and sometimes free. Imagine a country which has 1 billion people with smartphones, which India is going to be in maybe 2 or 3 years. And about 1.2 billion people have an Aadhaar, an identity to do digital transactions. So we got digital access, the digital infrastructure, we got everybody who's got a Aadhaar number to make the things work. So in the digital world, we are there. Now what is required? What is required is, what do you do with the digital world? Can you get access to business, to e-commerce? E-commerce industry is growing up. Amazon is there, fighting for his life. Walmart put 16 billion. And both of them are going to fight. And then the big daddy, Reliance, is going to come in. And Reliance has got 250 million subscribers to do e-commerce. And we're going to see this proliferation of e-commerce going. So business is going to be there. In the startup world, 40,000 startups, about $100 billion of value. Every year we get 5 to 6,000, $13.5 billion money coming in. And we'll have 100,000 startups by 2025. And we'll have 3.25 million people. We are 2 years behind the valley. Most Silicon Valley companies have their back-end engineering in Bangalore. Am I right, Vivek? So the engineering is here, the marketing is here. Of course, in terms of artificial intelligence, your universities, you're far ahead of India. But in terms of engineering and ability to code, ability to think, and do all that, India is right 2 years behind. And this is going to transform India. For example, health. There are AI companies which take a drop of blood, digitize it, put it in the cloud, and come back within 10 minutes with a pathological report. There are AI companies which look at the dense breast tissue of a young person and find out heat spots using digital imaging to find out cancer cells. So just imagine what this can do. And there are agriculture tech companies which run drones, use satellites to find out how the crops grow and give advance warning about pest attacks or how the crop's going to fare out. So we're going to have, and we have this digital network, we have access, we have extremely low cost, and we have innovation coming up. What do we lack? Government policies are very good because government is behind the curve in policies. All right? We don't have a data privacy law yet. We're going to have it. Our information servers are here. So, we got a small challenge. So policy is not an issue. The only thing that is an issue for us is we are on the way to becoming a digital colony. And Vivek has been talking about it for long. Google owns India, Facebook owns India, Twitter owns India, and all the data is here in America. We want our data back. And when the data comes back to India, we will have a huge amount of social data, we'll have a huge amount of commercial data, and this data is going to change. The transaction value is very small, so you don't see the impact like in the US, but in technology adoption terms, and last point, Vivek, people who are 70 and 80 are using a smartphone to do video conferencing to talk to their grandchildren in Dubai. In a remote village, a woman comes up, turns on the phone, and does a video with a young child. It's happening. Can you imagine 80-year-olds doing it? And they never had a phone in the house. So I think many, many things are happening. So everything is, masala is there, capital is coming, innovation is there, and we're deeply integrated with America.
Right.
The integration between the Valley and India is what is going to be the killer app for India.
So that integration is certainly something worth looking at because you're right, a lot of the data is here in the US. Perhaps even more scary, a lot of that data is now also in China because a lot of Chinese companies in there. That data is going, a lot of the news space is dominated by Chinese companies, Paytm. So they are, and I'm sure the government is concerned about that. Before I look at the regulation and the entire environment, Vivek, just wanted to get you in. You're one of the best people I know in looking at the future and being able to predict the future, both the good and the bad. It's not that everything is entirely rosy. As technology and digitization spread, there will also be negative consequences of that. You've been writing, for example, about the possibility for joblessness and other such things, here in the West. Would those same negative trends also happen in India? And how do you see India positioned in this entire wave of digitization?
Yeah, I mean, I'm as optimistic as Mohan is, if not more optimistic, because I see digital simply being yesterday's. The reason why you talk about digitalization and digital is because you have a bunch of tech companies who are catching up to the dialogue we had 5 years ago and saying we're going to be digital too, we're learning AI too. The World Economic Forum calls it the fourth industrial revolution. And they're also underestimating the magnitude of change that's happening. Everything about ourselves, our lives is about to change. We're about to now wipe out almost every major industry that exists. The next 5, 10, 15 years, you can look at almost all of the major companies, the Fortune 500 companies being demolished. And new trillion-dollar industries being created, new billion-dollar businesses being created. It's not only in e-commerce and so on. It's also, Mohan talked about health. We're talking about digital tutors, digital doctors that manage our health 24/7. We're talking about genomic sequencing and the microbiome. We're talking about gene editing. Editing diseases out, creating new types of plants. We're talking about robots that do what we saw in science fiction. We're talking about new materials that are more stronger, smaller, thinner than everything we've seen before. We're talking about quantum computers, smashing every encryption algorithm known to mankind. That's the type of advance we're talking about in the next 5, 10, 15 years. India has a chance to not only catch up, but to lead this revolution. If we do things right, if India does things right. It's a win-win for Silicon Valley if Silicon Valley leaves its giants aside and lets its startups get engaged with it. So therefore, a lot of what you folks are doing here is right on, because it's a matter of bringing the minds together and using technology for good. So now your question specifically was about the jobless future. I'm really worried about what's going to happen to America and Europe, because you're already beginning to see the robots taking over. I mean, we're behind. America is behind the times, to even China in terms of automating supermarkets. But in the next 5 years or so, you'll have cashierless supermarkets everywhere. You're going to have robots now dispensing food and serving us. We're going to have self-driving cars taking over our roads. We're going to decimate jobs in America in the 10 to 15-year time frame. Before that, we'll create many new jobs. The next 5 years, 7 years are going to be the most amazing possible for America, because we're going to be building new technologies and rebuilding infrastructure. So it's very positive in the short term. Long term, jobs begin to disappear. But that's a decade away. As far as India goes, India has to rebuild its entire infrastructure. You're talking about a country in which the infrastructure is completely garbage. I mean, it's disgusting how backward India is. But that's opportunity time, because
but it's changing really fast.
It's changing really fast, but what's changing is...
The airports used to be the worst in the world till about 6 years ago, and now suddenly they're among the best in the world. Before you know it, you've gone from telecom deficit to telecom surplus. Before you know it, you're suddenly seeing power is everywhere. So it's changing, and it's starting to change
Those cities
fast.
have to be rebuilt. You have to leave Delhi and Mumbai and create brand new, clean cities and so on and so on. But trillion-dollar opportunities. So India has so much to do that it could take its entire population, employ them 2 or 3 times over to rebuild India. So I'm not worried about the jobless future in India for at least 30 or 40 years. And then we'll figure it out.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you, to take on from that also, but also just wanted to understand what you think the big challenges are if all of this is going to come to pass, and a very high possibility it will. What is it that India needs to do to make sure it rides the waves?
So first, let me take on that point on infrastructure. And, while there are 2 lenses we can look at India at. One is that what has been done and what has not been done. And what has been done in a short period of time over last decade or so, and maybe last 5 years or so. I would say it's been an amazing feat.
From where you started.
From various,
Not where you want to be, like he says.
And if I look at what is not yet done, I look at it completely differently. That is the opportunity which is still there in India. If 90% of it was done, then there was no opportunity. But just by doing 30% of what we needed to do, if we have a 1.3 billion population and 1 billion phones with about 400 million of being them smartphone, we still have the opportunity of getting the balance 800 million people and a smartphone. And then every 2 years, every 3 years, you change that to smartphone. That is the opportunity lying there. Where is still 65% plus of the population living in the rural areas, where education, healthcare needed to be done. That's a huge opportunity. And the way I look at it, if India has to go to the $10 trillion economy, it is the digital economy is the only way you can make India $1 trillion economy. There is no way India can reach a $10 trillion economy mark if you're not including the larger population. The only way to include its larger population is to get technology into it.
So let me actually get Solomon on that note, because it used to be said 4 or 5 years ago, and everything changes 3 or 4 years as things go along. It used to be said that the digital revolution is in fact going to increase inequalities. You're going to have a digital divide. You're going to have the digitally empowered and the rest of the population who's going to be completely left out. As it turns out, we're now increasingly hearing what Akhil was just saying, that actually it's going to be the opposite. The digital revolution is helping in spreading equality more. That's also part of the work that you've been doing with smart villages and the like.
Yes, and smart villages is a concept that was used by a lot of people in India, a lot of agencies, a lot of government programs. But the way I define smart villages is totally different than the rest of the world does. And I said it's a community empowered by digital technology. I'm not building infrastructure. I'm into building people. It's a community empowered by digital technology and open innovation platforms to access global markets. So I really believe it's the communication is the most important need, and those vehicles that take us there. If you see a person in a manhole, cart down there. If you said, do you want energy? You say, I don't want, what can I do with energy? I need a phone I can connect so someone can get me out of here, right? It's that connectivity that is what we need. And I run a hospital and a school in India. Every maid, every sweeper, every driver has a cell phone. And every time I go, I see a basket of old ones people are throwing away, and they buy a new one, including the maids. And they're telling me, one day I wanted to go to the bank to draw some money. They said, don't do that. This is the maid who's uneducated telling me at the table, use your cell phone and transfer the money to your son at Berkeley because you don't need to go there, and don't waste your time there. So I teach innovation at Berkeley. And so I'm being taught by a sweeper lady who didn't go to school, don't waste your time. And that is the kind of revolution. And Mohan just made a very interesting observation about the future and how we have everything right there. All the pieces of the puzzle are right there at the table, but they're unevenly spread. It is our responsibility to take the technology, which is already here, the knowledge that's already here, and put it together so you can see the complete picture. And we need more orchestrators in this game to put that together, and we don't have one. We need a Winston Churchill or someone like that who'll say, let's put the pieces together, because everything we need right now is here. We generate so much knowledge in these universities, there's so much technology, but it's not together.
You need anything but Winston Churchill's, my friend.
Don't have Shashi Tharoor.
Orchestration talent.
Shashi Tharoor, if he was here, he would have cheered you up for that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I mean, Churchill perhaps not the best example, but all right, fine. We can
exactly what India doesn't want.
Yeah.
Vikram, I can make a point. Although it's very difficult to talk about the statistics after Mohan has spoken, he's not left anything for us to talk about. But there's one thing which I would like to call out is when this new telecom company came in a couple of years back in India and started throwing very cheap data. Now it cost, if you were to buy 15 cents for 100 rupees for unlimited data, 15 cents for 1 GB. The people got hooked onto it, and flat 18 to 24 months, India moved from 155th in the world on data consumption to #1. Last year, the data consumption in India was US and China put together.
It was Bollywood. Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you for raising that, because if you look at the data consumption, it's all entertainment, right? But what it does, it got people to hooked on to that mobile device. And now when you push education and healthcare and Jan Dhan account, people will take it.
I watched the videos also, by the way.
Vikram, I want to make a point about expectations. We are 1.3 billion people. We are not 350 in the US, 65 in the UK, maybe 75, 80 in Germany. We are not that. We are 1.3 billion people. It's going to take time. So we have this expectation for 1.3 million to make a leapfrog into the future. It's going to take time. So give them 10 years. 10 years is not too much. It's very small. But what happened in the last 2 years, it never happened anywhere in the world in 2 years. And what's going to happen in the next 2 years is never going to happen anywhere. And that too, in a country where the capacity to invest is low. You go to China, they're setting up 45,000 charging points for the electric vehicle the next 2 years. The government is doing that. All right? Now they're giving subsidies to build 7 million electric vehicles in the next 4 to 5 years. The government is doing that. We don't have a benevolent government with a lot of money. We don't have that capital. China is a $13 trillion economy. Okay? So we have scale. So you're not going to see great infrastructure there, everything. Everything has to be recreated. But we made an important point. This is not a country constrained by demand. This is a country constrained by supply. And the whole world supplies still not be enough. Now that means India is open to the world, and you come in and we can absorb that, and you'll see a dramatic change. So I think we have to see India very differently. So the change is enormous. The incremental change is unbelievable, right? The only country which could match that is China. But I think in some ways we're ahead of China. But on the base is low. Per capita income is only $2,000. PPP is some $6,000. America is $50,000. Are we going to get to 50? We get to 50, there won't be enough air, good air to breathe for America. Am I right?
Well, if we can clean up the environment, they will.
I mean, no, in 10 years you can't change that because you've got a backlog. So my view is only that scale is a very, very big issue, and let's not forget that.
Right, I don't want to go to challenges and opportunities. Let me look at you first with opportunities, right? Because obviously, I think all of us are believers that there's a massive amount of technological change that is coming, and that's part of what we're talking about in digital revolutions and the digital economy is part of those technological changes. In some of those, India may have strong competitive advantages. Solar, for example, for logical reasons, if there is a solar transformation that takes place, India, one of the countries to do that. Which do you think are the biggest opportunities?
Vikram, in every technology I look at, everything from AI, robotics, networks, sensors, nanomaterials, India has the largest opportunities in the world. The only technology where I don't see India participating is quantum computing. But that it doesn't matter. It's so far out in the fringe. Every area of technology, India could be leading because it has the need, number one. It has the talent, number two, to do that. And the money is there as well. There's no shortage of money there to invest in companies because the cost of starting companies has dropped dramatically. So that, and Indians actually have an advantage. Indian students, Indian entrepreneurs, they can stay with mommy and daddy. And they don't have to worry about food. So all they need is a laptop and some core technologies, and they can build amazing things.
Okay, that's the opportunity. What are the challenges?
So challenges are, when it comes to the data, that's a big challenge, whether it is in terms of data privacy or whether in terms of cybersecurity. Technology will lead to those kind of challenges, and unless those are taken care of, we may be in a situation where we are losing out because we are not controlling our data.
So data is one. The other possible challenge, I mean, like historically, whenever one was drawing the comparisons with China, and the first comparison obviously comes as the role being played by the government, and with infamous Indian red tape and bureaucracy, and efforts have been made, of course, to try and make it much easier to have startups, to do all of that. I mean, it's also, I guess, a lot of work that needs to be done there.
So certainly, India is already adopting the norms on data privacy, which are more stringent than even what Europe has suggested. But to implement those measures in India is going to be a big challenge.
Vikram, we talk about bureaucracy, red tape, corruption. For God's sake, we've grown at 8.7% a year in dollars for 27 years, despite all this. It's holding us back from growing at 10%. That's all. But it's still growing. We got 20 unicorns in startups in the last 5 years. Okay? I mean, is it anything holding them back? No. The reason is very simple. Even there's bureaucracy and all that, the implementation is very weak. We have 40% of Indian businessmen who follow no law. So you can put the sternest law, criminalize, put people into jail for all infringement. Nobody goes to jail, but they become billionaires. You know that. You interview some of them. So it's not a handicap. It's not a handicap per se, like in America.
I'm trying to figure out which of them I've interviewed, actually.
No,
yeah, I mean, now I know.
In America, if you have a tough regulation, you enforce the law. You follow the law. Our regulation is weak in enforcing. So there is a...
But that's not surely the right way to go. That's saying, okay, we're going to have really tough laws and don't worry.
I'm telling you the reality. I'm not saying what is right or wrong. I'm telling you the reality. Because how do you explain 8.7% a year growth in dollar terms, CAGR for 27 years? Please give me an explanation. All the economists in the world, everybody else, business school professors, please explain to me.
Okay, business school...
Bureaucracy...
All right, business school professors, explain it. He's saying that it's got that. So do you think that red tape and bureaucracy has been played and in fact doesn't need to be removed? Or as Mohandas says, it's not really held us back all these years?
It has to be removed, but I'm telling you, we need better law enforcement.
In practical terms, he's saying it hasn't really held India back too
Yes,
much.
it's very difficult. We have been working on ground in villages for the last 2.5 years, working with village politicians all the way up to the chief ministers. Things don't move. The culture is such that it's very, very difficult to cut through that. Every time we ask to get something moved, they say, how much do you have in mind to give? So it's very, very hard at the lower levels. Maybe the corruption has ended at the higher levels, but at the lower levels it's still there. And we find this incredibly difficult. But I think, to his point, yes, we have grown, but we could have grown much bigger.
Exactly.
That's the thing. If these roadblocks are removed, we would propel and accelerate exponentially.
So I think one of the aspects that emerges from that, therefore, Akhil, is that the entire point of digital economy, so okay, connectivity is one of them. Getting everyone to use the mobile phones is part of it. But also the opportunity that comes from digitalization is if everything moves online, if permissions are online, if you can start getting those things done, it removes discretion. Tomorrow, if you digitize your entire land, let's just take an example, land records. You digitalize all land records, have them available. People don't need to go and sit in a patwari's office and pay the person and saying, can I sell a piece of land to somebody else? So there's a lot of solutions to these problems that can come from digital trends.
It's already happening. People are taking videos of the people they're giving bribes to, putting them on YouTube, and suddenly they're being held accountable. So technology is going to help a lot over there.
Yeah, that's also true.
Yeah, so that's one part of it.
And your TV shows in particular, I mean, it's crazy.
But as I said earlier,
You should say, hey, this guy on TV, I saw a clip the other day. I was like, oh my God, is that the same Vikram I know?
Which one was that now? There are all sorts of clips, and I want to know which one this is referring to.
so, Vikram, as I said earlier, if India has to move from today to $5 trillion to $10 trillion economy, it has to be inclusion of the larger population, and larger population will get included only when technology is adopted. And therefore, if you look at the areas, we have done pretty well in shortest period of time in retail, in telecommunication, in financial sector. But if you look at sectors which will impact the rural areas, which will bring the country to be a larger economy, we need to talk about agriculture, how we are using the technology in agriculture, or if how you're making the country far better and ease of doing. I mean, I know we all proud of having moved from 142 to 100 in 2 years' time on the ease of doing business index. But for a country like India, which is the third largest on a purchase power parity basis economy in the world, to be on 100 place is still a long distance to cover. Now,
Yeah, can you just use that one?
so if you have to get that country from 100 to 50, which is the vision the Prime Minister has, you have to use technology in all these sectors. So you put blockchain in land reform. So issues are your judiciary is an issue, your land is an issue, your labor laws are an issue. Now some of these issues can be tackled and can be tackled only if you use technology on land records. If you use a judicial system, you put everything, all the cases and the results, the judgments on a record, and then you are able to refer it sooner. You don't have to have a duplication of litigation or the scheduling system for judges to sit in the court and resolve it.
Don't keep calling people to come in for court hearings after court hearings.
Vikram,
you do it on video conference.
Vikram, the solution is in democracy. Our people are demanding performance of the government. This government now is giving 80 million gas connections to poor women. They're already given 50 million because they know they'll be voted out of power if they don't do it. 10 million houses are being built. 10 million houses, a huge problem. Everybody will have a house. We got 30 million households. Everybody will have a house by 2022. It may be a crappy house, which has to be rebuilt in 10 years, but they'll have a house. Power connections have been given to all villages now, and everybody will have power in the next 2 years. All right? Toilets. We had 38% of people having a toilet 4 years ago. Now it's 92%. Why? People are demanding. They know they'll be voted out of power. So democracy is so beautiful. It is pushing up people's aspiration. We have 650 million people below the age of 30 who are going to vote. 35 who are going to vote. So the aspirations is resonating with politicians, and in agriculture, the government has committed to give 50% more than the cost, and it's actually beginning to happen. So the political system is responding, Vikram. So we are seeing a change because the post-independent generation is going slowly. For them, independence is very important. They understood what it was. But a new generation, the post-91 generation, which are coming to voting age, they're very different. They don't care about any of the other traditional things in this country. They want a car, they want a job. Also, it could lead to social instability because the aspiration is so high. If they don't get it, there'll be a challenge. So we are on the on the verge of something very dynamic.
Solomon's trying to say something. He says democracy is going to solve the problems.
Yeah.
We have some people whom I do hear, not a majority, but I have some people whom I hear saying, yeah, but look at what China is doing. Maybe we shouldn't have ever had all this.
If I'm with Mohan, the world will be a wonderful place. India has all kinds of great future and all of that, but there are some challenges there. But he's right about, there's another phenomenon that's happening that I'm seeing in villages, which is called social capital. This financial capital is powerful, but every time I go and speak in villages, I see a large number of women coming for my sessions because they want to become entrepreneurs. And they're powered by a cell phone. And every time I ask, how come all these women show up? Where are the men? They say, well, these are all self-help groups. They form them into communities, and they help each other, and they practice open innovation where knowledge flows, and they train each other. And what they do is now they're empowered with the cell phone that they can vote people out of office if they don't want to, like them. And the politician goes to them rather than them going to the politician a few years ago. And that is the kind of command they do. So technology in this sense, the cell phone, is really helping them text, send SMS, communicate, and building the social capital is such a powerful thing. Just like Airbnb, that community overthrew the laws of New York because even though Attorney General said, we're going to wipe this thing out, they overturned it because it's social capital. That phenomena is happening because of technology and in their hands.
So I did an opinion poll about 6-7 years ago, before a lot of these really dramatic transformations come, and we asked people what has been the single biggest development since independence, which has had the most impact. And an overwhelming majority of people wrote in and saying the mobile phone. And that has transformed our lives like nothing else has, and that may well be true.
The next thing is going to be the internet and smartphone, connectivity.
So I think that's not being taken for granted almost, right? Thanks to all the stuff that's happened in the last 2-3 years. At the end of the day, the innovation and the technologies that will have the biggest impact in India, will it be some of these new innovative technologies at the grassroots, or will it be the same big mega trends as we are seeing in the rest of the world, AI and...
Vikram, the mega trends you're seeing right now is because the Googles and the Facebooks using social media, weaponizing social media, maximizing their revenue. The next is going to be from the ground up. Mohan talked about drones monitoring agriculture. You also have sensors that monitor agriculture. You're now going to have new types of crops being developed. All of these new technologies are going to be developed from the ground up, and they're going to be shared equally. One of the technologies that Solomon is testing in his smart villages is this medical device made in New Delhi called HealthQ. What's it doing? It's providing, testing, better diagnostics than you get in hospitals over here, and you get tested immediately and you've got the results on your smartphone. This is built by a New Delhi company. There are going to be thousands of innovations like that are geared towards the people that are not held back by Western regulations. You talk about regulations here. The entire medical system here is as corrupt as could possibly be. It makes India look like the land of the free and the uncorrupt when you compare it, because you're able to do innovations there and get it to the people in need immediately. So you're going to have a whole range of new innovations which are very different than what you have today in the next 5 or 10 years. And they're going to innovate from the ground up in India because you've got the skilled people there. There's millions of people who work for the Infosys, Tech Mahindras, who are fed up of working for their white masters. They're going to start companies, and they're going to change India. That's what you're going to see over the next decade or so.
You also said, and I think that's an interesting point to look at, that some of the biggest threats that people see in a country like India, water, for example. If you were to ask a lot of people, random sample in India, what do you think is going to be the biggest crisis that's going to derail everything? It's going to be a water crisis. Now, potentially, that can also be solved with technology. If you can actually get plentiful...
India is surrounded by water. Why can't you boil the water from the oceans? Because energy is too expensive. What happens when solar keeps dropping at the rate of 18 to 20% a year, as it has been for the last 30 years? The cost of energy goes to almost zero within 10 to 15 years. When you have unlimited, clean, distributed energy off-grid through solar cells and battery storage, you have all the clean water you want. That is happening on its own. Not because of the United States anymore. The US, in terms of energy, was leading the pack until a few years ago. Now, Donald Trump wants to bring beautiful, clean coal back. God help him. But the fact is, the US doesn't matter anymore. It's China and India, number 2, who are going to transform their countries using these new clean energies. And when you have, the cost dropping, which is happening regardless of what anyone does now, everything changes. So that problem will solve itself thanks to the advances in technology.
Do you agree with that?
No, I totally agree with him because the key thing that stopped assimilation of technology was access and cost. And China is the key figure. China's manufacturing progress is so enormous. They have decimated every industry in the world by mass manufacturing, using the labor advantage and reducing costs. Now they're going to the next level of automation. And their capacity to get capital goods in is unbelievable. The largest number of robots sold in the world is China. And China has just had 2 or 3% of its industry following robots. They still got to go a long way. And the way they build their houses, the way they build their buildings, in the shortest possible time. They build in record time bridges and everything else. So China's manufacturing progress, China's ability to scale up. All right,
you don't need Chinese robots. American robots, Indian robots work as hard as Chinese robots do.
But the Chinese, no, it's not about working. No, it's not about working. It's about the cost and the number.
That advantage that China has is going to disappear in the next 5 to 7 years because the cost of labor with robots is practically zero.
Yeah.
Right, so why do you have to now ship goods all the way across the oceans and then raw materials and then bring them back when you can just produce them locally?
I totally agree with you. When they're subsidizing you and giving you all the goodies at a low price, is fantastic. So I met an American banker, he's a great venture capitalist, not an investor. He came to visit us and he said, Mohan, how are you doing? I said, I'm doing well, and you know what? I went around the world and very so surprised. They want this green piece of paper, they're buying it, and I'm getting everything I want. I'm not able to understand. The greenback, everybody wants a greenback and to store that, right? Is that everybody is buying that and they're giving us goodies. It's like that. The China is supplying everything at such a low cost. To match that in the short term is going to be difficult.
But that's fixing itself with technology.
Yeah, but
so this is why India has to jump.
Yeah, you can leapfrog.
India has a chance to leapfrog because of the core technologies dropping in price.
Yes, and China is a great.
The next 5 to 10 years are going to be transformative because the entire equation changes. The balance of power changes.
I want to ask you a question along with the
Now, I'm
permission.
about to ask the audience a question. How many of you really want lunch, or should we just continue with this for a while?
Maybe
Okay. No, I'm supposed to go across to lunch very soon, so I'm going to get,
I'm BB Jagdish, and, it's phenomenal to actually hear a lot of the wonderful things that's going on in India. But let me just put across some of the realities of the challenges, right, that we actually see. Many of us who visit India.
Why do you spoil all the fun?
So number one, if you look at the major developments, major activities in India are all happening in big cities, right? And that's only like 5 or 6 cities. Outside of the 6 cities, there's nothing else that's going on. That's number one. Number two...
Actually, I would tend to disagree with that. If you see some of the smaller cities,
I would like to hear.
massive.
So that's number one. Number two is almost 75% of the engineering graduates who are coming out of schools are almost unhireable, right? And number three is, can India be, all this, the digital economy proliferation to the rest of the country in an equal way? Can we really do that just by being a service economy and by being a manufacturing economy with no innovation, real innovation that is coming up? I would just like to hear your views on that to see, whether we can really make this.
Which of those, first of all, do you want to just say which of those statements you would agree with?
That's interesting.
Look,
there
are enormous challenges. I see challenges, opportunities, because we remain in India and fought the battle. We built the world's best software service industry. I know you people don't like the word services, but service is the bedrock of any industry, any economy. Okay, we did it working from a remote country like India, where there are no engineers, untrainable people. We trained them, we invested in them, we made them world class. Yes, we have 800,000 Indians graduating in engineering. 75% are bad. They can drive a Ola or a Uber. But the 200,000, BB, they're like you. 200,000, that's a huge number. Huge number of people. So I agree with everything that you say. But I like to see the positive side. But I'm encouraged by what he said. Leapfrog means the disruption is so complete, you go from one generation to another generation, and if that other generation technology happens to be much, much cheaper in a country where purchasing power is less, the assimilation will go. How do you explain 250 million phones being sold in a poor country? How do you explain that? How do you explain 150 million smartphones being sold in that country? How do you explain for the last 3 years, airplanes, people flying in planes is gone up by 20% year on year for the last 3 years. Today we have 310 million people flying. You can fly from Bangalore to Delhi for 5,000 rupees, and 5,000 rupees is today maybe $60. You can fly Bangalore, Delhi on a good time for $25. How do you explain that? See, today his point is very simple. There is no legacy. It's a clean state. So when you're going leapfrogging to a clean state, what happens there with a low cost and a huge market is magic.
Can I just ask you, I mean, a related question on whether it's only happening in a few, because anecdotally that doesn't seem to be the case. Is it only a few cities or is it more widespread?
No, it is certainly more far wider than just the cities. Let's even take an example of ENAM, which is the e-market created for agriculture thing. It's not happening in the cities. It's happening for all the farmers across the countries. Whether it's toilets which have been built, it's not been built in the cities. It's been built in across all villages, 6 lakh villages across the country. Where you're talking about electrification, we just announced a couple of months back that even the last village in the country has been electrified. That's all happening in the villages. The healthcare scheme which is coming, announced by the Prime Minister, Ayushman. Now it will happen in the villages, not in the cities. And as I said earlier, the inclusion of that 2/3 population will drive Indian economy, and the government knows it. And the focus is far more on that population than the cities. Cities will happen automatically.
All right, gentlemen there. Then
the lady there, one lady, one there.
Okay, sorry, sir. If you've got the mic, let me just to ask a question. Let her ask a question, then I'll ask you next one.
So hi, it's great to see India transitioning from a services nation to a product nation, and hopefully leapfrogging and seeing the growth in the tier 2 cities in the near future. But one of the things, being a democracy, we feel the policies are, need to be changed rapidly and quickly to keep up with that. What is being done that, and how can we improve that part of India where the governance and the technologies can go hand in hand and make things happen? For example, the data localization, data prioritization policies that are in, they're probably not going to be favorable both ways. I mean, it has to be favorable for the Indian companies and startups at the same time for the MNCs that will jumpstart the growth into India. So,
okay,
any
you
comment
can pass the
on that?
mic there and then here, but in the meantime, you want to respond, any of you?
Look, India, democracy is a political economy. In the US, you have so many lobbies. India, we have so many lobbies. Each lobby gets what you want. Here is much more sophisticated. There is more brass. So to expect privatization of everything, this thing happening, it's not going to happen. Human beings change slowly. America has taken 200 years to be this vibrant democracy. You go back to the 1990 and 1920, go to Chicago with Al Capone, you find out what it was. See, things change. It takes time. No, yeah. Leapfrog, people's mind don't leapfrog. Users leapfrog. So you have to wait. It is gradual. See, innovation will be ahead of reality. And last thing about product, BV, you are supposed to make it happen in India. You left us and made it happen here. Come back.
All right, let me just get 3 quick comments. That gentleman, that gentleman, that gentleman. Yeah, carry on.
Okay, Mohan, I had this conversation.
I'm working hard.
You
are retired and having a great life. Come back and fight.
Mohan, I had this conversation with you 2 years ago, and Vivek, Vivek, I just had with you. Both of you guys are fascinated and very admiring of the China model of developing the local champions. One thing about those local champions is that they have not been able to export that thing to anywhere in the rest of the world. They've been able to send the money, but they have not been able to export their model or their success. US has. So when you talk about controlling the data, India dominated outsourcing industry for the last 20 years because of one reason. Great talent, very inexpensive. Data is going to do the same thing for next 20 years. And if you control the data, if you put those kind of restrictions on data, there will be reciprocal control on the other side. And now, won't you be depriving the Indian talent of this opportunity to build, you see, the next big thing is here on data?
Vicky, it's not a matter of China or not China. If you look at what the debates we're having in the United States with Facebook and the mystery Google on stage at the Congress and Senate level and so on, them ripping into these companies for abuse of power, there's a problem here with the tech industry having become a monopoly. It's not capitalism anymore. This is a monopoly we have over here because of the data that they've been able to gather. So there's a dysfunction happening in the tech industry. Even in the United States, we're debating regulations. India has to go one step ahead of that. It has to now start thinking about what can we do so we don't have the same mess happening over here. We've seen how WhatsApp is like, it's a danger. I mean, it's like a car without brakes. It should be banned from India, not the whole WhatsApp, but the WhatsApp group chat feature, because it's destructive. It's caused carnage in India. Facebook was accused by the United Nations of causing genocide in Burma, in Myanmar, right? Because these technologies are faulty, because these tech companies are out of control. So you have an imbalance over here. So India has to be smarter and develop regulations to prevent its people from being colonized or their technologies being weaponized against them. It has the opportunity to do that. And the good thing is that the policymakers do seem to be understanding. They seem to be getting it. And I'm actually very impressed with a lot of what I see coming out of policy circles in India, because they're looking forward and they're looking globally and they're trying to solve the problems before they happen. We need more of that, not less. We need to have sensible regulations which allow a local ecosystem to develop, but also have strong ties to others abroad. You need to have entrepreneur to entrepreneur between Silicon Valley, Israel, Korea, and India, and all these countries coming together at the lowest levels.
All right, that gentleman then, yeah.
Hi, my name is Upendra, and my question would be for Akhil. Akhil, you have been involved with the Smart City Initiative for India. Do you see, what level of traction do you see, or is just the buzz for India? And if that is the truth on the ground, is there a deadline for this initiative? That's number one. Especially most of the parents are pushing their children for going to IT, AI, machine learning, deep learning. What's happening to civil and mechanical and traditional, those trades, So talent is declining in India, and there would be a deficit of talent, especially for infrastructure for sure. Being a civil engineer, and there's a Ashok Venkateswar Sahab? No, he will vouch for it. No, is it not true?
No.
So can I get the statistics on the smart city then?
What is that?
Smart city.
Smart city. Yeah, I think you could probably speak for it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Akhil, you want to respond then? Yeah.
Sure. So you correct me if you think differently, Mohan. But there are number of initiatives which Government of India announced 3-4 years back. Now, some has progressed better than others. And as far as the smart city is concerned, it's not done as well as we thought, right? But there are two aspects to smart cities. One is those 100 smart cities which we were trying to convert the existing cities into smart cities. But they are also planned to create new cities on the Delhi-Mumbai corridor. Now, is it needed? It is needed. Has it gone as much into the progress as we thought? Probably not. But this is something which we will continue. I mean, this is one initiative which is not done as well as we thought. Mohan.
See, the digital world goes much faster than the physical world. And when you deal with government, there is no capacity in government to think of smart cities. They're always work with shoddy cities. They spoil the cities. They can't think of smart cities. And government runs the show, because governments have to run towns. We need town government. We don't have, like you do, city governments. We have state government, central government, village government, not city governments. We are screwed up massively. Spoiled it. Please understand, there's a governance issue. You have to build capacity for governance, and that is the challenge. Not the technology, not the engineers. It's the capacity to manage and governance.
All right, Solomon, then I'm going to get one last question, then I think lunch is...
Sure. Mohan, you're right. Digital moves much faster than the physical. I used to teach smart cities courses at Berkeley, and I quit because... Number one, smart cities cost a lot of money. A lot of technology becomes obsolete, high maintenance. And we thought when Modi said we'll build 100 smart cities, it'll happen. I don't see one yet, very further from it. But however, what he said is digital moves much faster. I switched over to smart villages because there I'm not building infrastructure. I'm empowering people with digital technology because it moves much faster, less investment, and it builds the individual. You're building the individual, the infrastructure in the individual, rather than the physical infrastructure. There's a lot of truth to that.
All right. One question here, then that gentleman there, then I have to end. There's lunch.
Thank you. Question for Vikram. My name is Silverman, by the way. I'm called Chandiwala. My question is this. I heard earlier that India went from number 155 in data consumption to number 1. And then I heard the word entertainment, and I heard the word Bollywood, and then I heard that you, in a sense, have left broadcasting to get into digital distribution. Connect the dots, and where is it going? And why have you made the leap?
Well, the connection is obvious. It's exactly for that reason. As more and more people are starting to consume content on digital platforms, the entire concept of television news is increasingly becoming redundant. So I was working on TV news until I realized that most of television news was unwatchable. Anybody from India will vouch for that. Anybody of you who has been to India and watched a television news channel, raise your hand and testify to the amount of brain damage that has been done. It's not watchable. So therefore, and it's not watchable for various reasons. So therefore, you have to leapfrog. So now we're working on how do you get news to be distributed to you on digital platforms, and hopefully that will be the solution. So it's precisely because of these trends that we are seeing that you have to figure out how do you use technology, how do you use digital forces to transform existing businesses. And if you can do that, existing, and I think we've been talking about disruption, you'll see entire industries.
The real answer is that he's everyone else becoming filthy rich by becoming an entrepreneur. He says, I want to be a billionaire too. No, and his technology is actually very decent. I'm waiting for it to come to the United States because I'd love to be able to get news served to me the way he's serving it to Indians right now. So his technology could actually be a good global thing.
Vikram, the good part is that now I control the TV remote in my house because my wife has moved on to a dude.
Well, with this, you can get personalized news delivered for you. And for her, it'll be different. All right, I did say last question and then lunch. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I like that and then I
my name is Dave Geary. I left India 50 years ago.
Come back now.
But India never left me. I'm a teacher, and I go to India and teach at many IITs and so on. What I see in India is, I'm talking about the academic research and so on. Many students come and show me a paper published in the US and say, can you explain this or can you explain that? And the research there seems to be somewhat incremental. Take a paper published somewhere and do a little bit differently and get 3.2 instead of 3.1, etc.
Yeah.
My question is, after the colonial era ended, are Indians getting intellectually colonized at this time?
Yeah, the old research doesn't matter anymore. These papers that we publish here in academia, I'm at Harvard and I'm been at Duke and I'm at Carnegie Mellon, so I've published many papers. No one reads those papers. Irrelevant. What matters here is being able to take the innovations that are happening and apply them, create startups that make global impact, and solve real problems. And that's what's possible today. Even the youngest of the young right now can do it. There's a group here from Rajasthan, which I met this weekend. I was blown away with the energy and the optimism and so on. Those people, those kids are more valuable than the researchers at universities, more valuable than the PhDs. India needs more of these kids, not the PhDs. They don't matter anymore.
Wow, that's a strong statement. Okay, ma'am, just stand up and just speak. Yeah.
And I'm talking as an academic, by the way.
I am an academic, and I'm from Gender and Women's Studies. I just wanted to ask, I think that it's really good for me to be here, I'm an outsider in a way, but I wanted to ask, so if technology has been so amazing, how is it that we have moved to such a alt-right, fascist, misogynist culture, public culture in India and in US and all around the world? So I take your point, technology has always been that it makes this kind of leapfrog, as you say.
Because men have been dominating and they feel insecure when they have women who are smarter than them, more sensible than them, succeeding, so they've held them back. Right. But this has to change.
So I think women are part of this as well, so I don't think it's just men, but I agree with you, it's a misogynist culture. But I was thinking about the public good, the kind of the Silicon Valley tech industry and the Indian tech industry, do they think about the public good? Because it's about profit often, right?
No, it's a boys' club which is obsessed with greed.
In Infosys, I was director HR. We have 45% engineers in the incoming batch. We have 40% women in the workforce. Okay? Women have joined in the past. 45% engineers. Show me any country barring China where there are 45% engineers in the incoming force. You need to understand one important thing. Sorry for me if I'm aggressive, pardon me. See the
That's
change
fine. I
in
have
the
one
increment.
too.
See the change in the increment. Don't see the change in the base. The base is huge. It'll take 100 years to change the base. But see the change in the increment at the edge. What he's doing, what we are seeing is unbelievable.
I'm not questioning that. I'm just saying about the change in global culture around the idea that, we don't, like China, okay, it's obviously a neoliberal, socialist, and quite authoritarian government, but at the same time, the public has gained a lot. And you talked about infrastructure,
I wrote a
which was
book called
brilliant.
Innovating Women, which basically says that women own the future because technologies give them the advantage, and they are going to rise. They are going to be the leaders. If you look at all the data, more women are graduating in all the right things. They're succeeding. Next 5 or 10 years, you're going to see a major shift happening, which is overdue.
Can I just, to end this, just one last word would be, I think, starting off with something that Mohan said earlier, the thing with understanding India is, of course, the question of paradoxes. So though women's rights have always been a problem in India, to some extent the reverse is sometimes true, that the glass ceiling sometimes, you don't think twice if you're being... India's been ruled by a woman like so many decades ago, which has still not happened in the US, for example. I've always had a female boss. I never thought twice about it. I've had people coming, when I used to run a media company, I had a researcher coming to me from Harvard, actually, and saying, what percentage of your top management is female? And I looked at her and said, something, I haven't even thought about it once. So she said, why? Doesn't that mean that there's gender discrimination? I'm saying quite the reverse. Real gender equality is when you don't ever think about it. And then we sat down with her and we actually added it up. And 70% of people in senior positions were females. 70% were females. But that's why we never thought about it. It never occurred to everyone to say, is she a female or is he a male? And on that note, lunch.